everyone that's on currently, just mute your microphones. And then the format's going to be we're just going to, I'm just going to, speak to John informally to start with. And then you should see, if you guys are on your laptops at home, you should see a chat box down the bottom. And that chat box is where I want you guys to be asking some questions. Okay, so as John's talking, you might think of some questions. Go ahead and go into the chat box and then ask your questions from there. Okay, but keep your microphones muted if you can at this stage. And here's Big John.
Morning, Sandon.
Good morning. So just asking everyone to keep their microphones muted.
Sure.
John's going to come on and have a chat, and then we're looking to use the chat box down below during when John talks. People can ask some questions to him, but we would just want to keep their mics muted, and I'm just going to have a bit of a chat to John informally, and then get and parents to open it up, or coaches that are on want to ask him a few questions.
Done. Sure. Thank you.
John, can you hear me all right, John?
I've got you, mate. Can you hear me?
Good. There's your camera. So can everyone see John on camera there?
Yep.
All right. So John, I think we'll start. Now, I'm not sure why. Gio, I don't know. I'm not sure why you're coming up on my screen, but it should be John. But what is everyone seeing on screen at the moment? They seeing John or they seeing Gia?
Yeah.
Seeing you, Sandon.
You seeing me?
Yes.
I'm seeing Sam now.
It's
You can
basically
also-
whoever's speaking, we see.
Okay, well, I'll just get John to speak.
But you can also do a bit of a grid too, I think. So with me, I can see a group of people. If you hover over, if you can see yourself, if you hover over that screen, there should be a little grid button. So I can see up to 6 people now if I want to.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got that?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, let's start, John. Mate, really appreciate you coming on to have a chat to the SA NDS athletes. Obviously, we know we're joining you in your quarantine in Sydney. I guess you're joining all of us in our quarantine in Adelaide. Fortunate enough for us, we've only got 6 days. What are you on, day 3 of 14 days?
Yeah, look, I'm day 4 of 14. So really important to kind of knock it back one day at a time. I'm really looking forward to getting into the single digits. So after I pass this one, I think the end's getting a little bit closer, but it's not easy. That's for sure. I've been away, as we'll probably touch on pretty quickly. I've been away probably for the last nearly 4 months, a week before Cincinnati, which was played in New York this year. And that whole time I've been into a kind of bubble quarantine lifestyle, not confined to just my hotel room, but confined to the courts and the hotel. It's been a little bit different. It's not tennis as I'm accustomed to. And it culminates in a 14-day stay here in Sydney. But at least we won State of Origin.
Yeah. So I know you came home to that, and look, us South Australians, well, I'm obviously New South Welshman, but so they don't really follow state of origin. But we did have the first one here in Adelaide, which Queensland got on top of. But mate, look, I guess we just want to talk a little bit. I mean, currently sitting at number 38. I guess I did a little bit of homework, and for the year, you've played 31 matches, which in this COVID year has been, I guess, been lucky, because I know a lot of the kids and that we've had here that in the squads and that we just haven't had a lot of match play. And I guess after COVID, you went away and played. I guess you had a win-loss of 10-9, but you won your first ATP title in Kazakhstan, which is next door to Borat territory, we know. And I guess lucky number 3. Great effort to win your first tour title.
Yeah, look, it was obviously a pretty tough decision. The last lot of tennis I played before the tour resumed was actually in Adelaide for Davis Cup, where you, Sandon, presented the gold jackets to a couple of our new players, James Duckworth and Alex Bolt. So that was actually my last tennis matches before going on to having that really long break, that 5-6 month break that we had when pretty much the whole world locked down. So it was unusual to start off with when I got on a plane after having some really good success with the team in Davis Cup, which was incredible. And I really enjoyed playing in Adelaide there. And I got on the plane to Indian Wells, and I actually went to the courts after, flying for 14 hours and got my accreditation. I actually had a round of golf, 9 holes there, and got off the golf course, and I found out that Indian Wells was cancelled and pretty much tennis was cancelled. So it was a long period back home. And then the decision came when tennis was to resume, and there was a fair bit of COVID about it, especially in America and in Europe, was whether I was going to go over and play tennis. For me, myself, I'm not someone that sits still too easily, and I love playing tennis, and I love getting out there and competing. And also, it's my job, and I won't lie, I probably, I needed the money. I needed to start making a living again. So I decided to embark on this new tennis adventure, tennis with COVID, and really happy I did. It was challenging at times. I've often said that this trip that I went on the last kind of 3.5, 4 months felt like I've been on longer trips before time-wise by myself overseas. When I was 18, 19, I'd just go away for 6 months by myself. But this trip in particular, even though I had some of my team, my girlfriend travels a bit with me, but also Peter Luchak was doing a lot of travel with me. Even though I had my team, it felt like one of the longest trips of my career to date, because mentally it was so draining not to be able to get outside. And after the US Open, we go indoors. So I was really confined just to the hotel and the tennis courts, which was something really unusual for myself. I like to get out, and I like to have dinners out, and just to try to mentally get away from the tennis court. And I wasn't able to do that for the last 4 months. But as you touched on, I managed to win my first ATP Tour title, which was a really big breakthrough for me. I've been in, that was my 3rd final I'd been in. I've been very successful in terms of the Challenger Tour, and I've won plenty of matches on the ATP Tour, and I've done well at Grand Slams. But to make that breakthrough and win an ATP Tour title was something that I really wanted to tick the box. Wayne Arthurs was always giving me a bit of stick that he's won a couple of titles and I hadn't yet. So it was really rewarding, and it was a culmination of a lot of hard work, but also I was proud of my efforts due to the circumstances that tennis was this year. And it's been a challenging year for everyone, and for myself especially. By the end there, I was starting to really mentally fatigue, to be honest with you, and to be able to lift the title at the end of the year was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Mate, so yeah, you speak about some of the other guys that on tour, like Duckworth and Balti and Tomo and even ex players like Wayne Arthur's up there, and I guess it's that competitiveness with all of you, isn't it? I mean, you give one another a bit of a hard time, but to have that group of like a peer group around you that are constantly pushing you, and you might see them win a tournament and be like, well, why is that not me? Um, did you have that in your junior career as well? Did you have a group of guys around you that were just always competing, and that's what became the competitive beast in you?
Yeah, look, I've always been a fan of strength in numbers. If I was designing a program, it would be trying to get as many players as possible into, top 500 and see them graduate as a playing group to the top 200. And then hopefully we can take a bunch of them and get them into the top 100, because I really do feel as if you feed off one another. I want my peers to look at myself and say, oh, look, Johnny Millman's top 50 in the world, why can't I? And I think that's something that I've always been a really big believer in, especially in player development. I think at times we can get lost trying to punch in the lotto ticket, trying to get the person that's going to win a Grand Slam. Those things are really hard to make it. A lot of those Grand Slam winners are it's their birth given right almost. I'm a big fan of actually strength in numbers, and from a young age, like you touched on, that competitiveness that within me, I wanted to compete the whole time. Whether early on, my earliest memories when I was 4 and 5 playing tennis was actually against my sisters. 3 of them were older, and whenever I was rallying with them or playing some points with them, I wanted to win. And to the extent that I carried on a little bit, I was, as a 5, 6-year-old, I was a bit of a crier on court. If my sisters were beating me, I'd be breaking down. But I really do feel as if that you want to enjoy competing. Whether you win or lose, every time you lose, even if it's in a practice set, for me, that hurts me a little bit. But you've got to enjoy the competition, because that's what tennis is about. It's about competing. It's about walking on the court and leaving it all on the line. And it's something that I really encourage when I'm talking to people is let's compete today. Even if you're drilling, let's try to be better than the person next to you, because I feel as if you can engage in that mindset, and as a playing group, if we can engage in that mindset, we'll get the best out of each other. So my early days were a little bit different to some of my peers in that I did all my schooling at home. Not at home, sorry. I did all my schooling at school. I didn't necessarily do some of the distance education. I think it's horses for courses a little bit. I think that in some people that really works to really have an intense program. In other instances, for me, it worked for me to have a bit more of a balance. I played other sports. I grew up playing a bit of soccer. I did some cross country. I played some golf, and ended up being, the sport I was best at was tennis. So I do feel as if that was really important for myself to always try to keep it competitive, and as time went on, I probably started to play with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I'll be the first to admit that. There were other kids probably that were off playing the junior Grand Slams when I was still at school, and I was wondering why my parents were keeping me in school. But they'd go off and they'd play junior Grand Slams, and then when I'd get to compete against them at, say, national events, I really played with a bit of a chip on my shoulder, because I had that mentality saying, well, look, I'm going to prove right now that I'm as good as my peers. I'm as good as you guys. Just because I've taken a slightly different path doesn't mean that you could count me out.
Oh, that's great, mate. That's really good for the young guys to hear. And I think I was going to talk about that a little bit, just your junior career. Because a lot of the kids and that on the call, some of them have gone off and played similar those ITFs that that we've had in New Zealand and New Caledonia and Fiji and
Yeah, I remember that trip.
Yeah, so towards, I mean, those are tournaments that you went over and you won towards the end of your junior career, but you weren't traveling and representing, probably playing a lot of representative, tennis at that junior age. And now you look at yourself at 31. The journey's been long. You've gone through 2 big surgeries with a shoulder and groin that you missed a couple of years, and here we are talking to you, and you're pretty much one of those guys now that's top 50 and maintain that, and to stay inside the top 50, as and it's tough, and credit to you and you. And that, for me, those 2 things on John Millman is perseverance, is massive, from all those setbacks of what you have, and just your attitude to the sport is fantastic.
Yeah, look, I did do a different path to a lot of my peers, and I want to stress that I'm a big believer that tennis is constantly evolving. What I did 10 years ago doesn't necessarily translate to it being successful today, because I think that tennis is constantly evolving, and you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to be able to change your approach as it goes. Otherwise, I feel like tennis is like this, and if you don't change along with it, it overtakes you. So I'm not necessarily an advocate to say what I did, when I was 16, 17 is the right approach. I think that there's multiple ways to be successful, and I think there's multiple ways to develop into a good tennis player. For myself, just from my journey, I had 2 school teachers as parents. My mum and dad were both school teachers, and therefore education was always quite important to them. So I was very lucky that I was at a really good high school, at Anglican Church Grammar School, and they were quite an all-rounded school. They understood that we had some really great rugby players, Pocock, Quade Cooper. We had some really good athletes that the school kind of tried to fit in around them. And Churchy allowed me to still do a fair bit of training to keep ticking along. And then in the school holidays, I'd go off and play some of these ITFs that you mentioned. I went off to New Caledonia and Fiji and New Zealand. I think that was one trip. And it was probably then that I started that was when I was 16, turning 17. And it was probably then that I realized, maybe I can play at tennis. I'd won a national title before and that, but I went on this trip and I went on the trip with a few of the guys who were doing their tennis full time and also that were touted to be quite good players, and that Tennis Australia identified to be pretty good players. And I won all 3 of those tournaments. And really, I was probably a little bit limited in the amount of training I'd been able to do. I came back from that trip thinking, you know what, when I finish school this year, I think I can really make a bit more of a go of this tennis thing. The one thing that taught me, by having kind of a bit of an abbreviated training program, I didn't do the hours on court that a lot of my peers were doing. But the one thing that I made sure is when I did spend time on court, whether it was school tennis even, I'd do 1 session a week with Jeff Masters, who was at QAS at the time. And I'd have a private lesson with Milton Rothman and Gary Stickler. And apart from that, I'd get the ball machine out on the court and I'd just hit balls by myself. But whether it was with the ball machine or whether it was my 1 private lesson a week or whether it was a session with Jeff Masters, from a pretty young age, I identified the fact that, I wasn't being able to do quite as much tennis as some of my peers, but what I really focused on, and I do remember this from a very young age, is to, when I'm going to go on the court, I'm going to be making it as intense as possible. I'm not able to get the hours on court as some of my opponents or peers. And therefore, when I will go on court, it's going to be a really high intensity. I'm going to bring that intensity in. And I think that really held me in good stead a little bit later on, because then I started to play these tournaments. And with tennis, you're not going to play great every match. I mean, we all know that. There's some matches where you're playing pretty average and you have to find a way. But also to improve your ranking, you have to be going deep in tournaments, and that means winning back-to-back-to-back matches. And I think being in my DNA that I'd practiced and worked on by bringing that intensity day in, day out, that actually really helped later on when I started to play these tournaments at a pretty competitive level, because each day I was able to bring a pretty high intensity, and therefore I didn't have so many of those off days, you know. But yeah, like you touched on it, it was a journey for me. It was a real journey for me. Early on, I was when I first started traveling, I over the course of my career, I've had 3 surgeries, 2 shoulders and 1 groin. I had my first one, my first year out of school, so when I was 18 years old, and it took time for me to develop into an established top 100, top 50 player. For me, I liken it to a bit of a trade, like doing an apprenticeship. You know, like an electrician will do his apprenticeship. He will, you know, it'll take him time and to learn the tools of his trade. For myself, that was the same thing. It really took me a fair bit of time to develop my game, find out what works for me, what doesn't work, and the things that don't work, then I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and work on them to get them better. And I think with that became a level of being comfortable. You know, early on when I started playing, I remember going to Spain when I was 18 years old. I was by myself. I'm in Spain, and it was 128. It was a $10,000 future. So the lowest futures that exist, the lowest level of professional tournaments that exist. So that means the smallest amount of prize money too. And it's 128 qualifying draw. So you had to win 4 rounds of qualies to get into the main draw. And once you got into the main draw, you got I think it was about 175 euro to get into the main draw. So 4 matches. If you lost in those 4, you got nothing. And I would remember thinking to myself, playing these 128 draw qualies, I remember thinking to myself, holy dooly, like this level's too good. These guys are good. There's so many of them. And I felt very uncomfortable. And it took me a while to develop that confidence within myself. And that happens when I started to win matches. And all of a sudden I was putting myself into main draws of futures and started to go deep in them. And then I'd graduate into the challenges, so the next level. And the whole process would start again. I would be playing matches and I'd be thinking to myself early on, when I'd exposed myself to this level, I was thinking to myself, man, is this level too high? Is this where kind of I peaked as a tennis player? But, you know, over time, I started to win more matches, started to make a few more quarterfinals, and finally got a breakthrough at that challenger level. And then that process started all over again when I got to the ATP level. So it's a journey. And what I want to stress to everyone is that everyone's on a different path. You know, for myself, you know, I hadn't developed early enough, or I wasn't good enough to really crack it early on, like a Nick Kyrgios or a Bernie Tomic or an Alex de Minaur. You know, these guys from juniors, they made that transition within a year or two to be established professional men's players. And for myself, it took time, whether that was because of injury, but also developing my game and improving, making improvements week by week, and eventually, you know, the results started to come, and a real sense of belief and belonging started to exist for me.
Well, that's just awesome advice for these guys. I want to get to some of their questions. I just got one more for you, John, that just love for you to talk to a little bit. And that was probably one of the biggest matches of your career was the Federer win at the US Open a couple of years ago. Did that really, was that just just talk about that experience for you and being one of the biggest stages of the world, playing one of, you know, the best players in the world, and winning that match. Did that really take you to another level of being a top 50 player as far as confidence? And I know Roger got you this year, got you back this year in 5, but really, I mean, that was an awesome match. I don't know if any of the kids got to see that match, but yeah, John won 7-6 in the 5th a couple of years ago at the US Open. Just talk a little bit about that match, and then we'll get to a few of their questions, mate.
Yeah, look, it was. I'd played Roger before. I'd played Murray before. I'd played a couple of the top guys before, and actually had come pretty close. For example, at the Brisbane International, I played both Andy and Roger there, and I pushed them to the deciding set in both of those matches. And so the US Open comes around, and you know, going into that US Open, it was interesting. It was, I was actually pretty down on myself. I had not a bad European clay season. I'd come home for 5 days. I smashed the gym, probably a bit stupidly, probably a little too much. And then I went over to America, and my first match, Cincinnati Qualies, I've tweaked my back pretty badly. So I'd gone into that US Open pretty underdone, and I got the same frames, but I got new frames, and I felt like they were a little bit off. So, you know, I just probably wasn't in the greatest headspace, and managed to get a decent draw first round and got through my first round. And it's funny with tennis, we've all been there where we're not feeling great about our game. We're probably a little bit low on confidence, and you kind of feel as if it's the end of the world a little bit. And it's so funny that you're not that far away. If you do all the little things in between, you know, those down moments, if you're doing those little things right, you're never that far away from turning it around. So I got through that first round match, and all of a sudden felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I started to get on a roll at the US Open. I think I beat Fognini the next round into Kukushkin, and all of a sudden I'm 4th round of you know, Flushing Meadows. So I'm up against Roger. I'd come close to a couple of these top guys before, but hadn't quite, you know, made that breakthrough, which is something that I was really hunting. And all of a sudden, I've got a night match on Ash. And Roger had actually gone into that match playing some pretty good tennis. There's if you look at his results, he hadn't been dropping many sets, and he was playing pretty well. And Ash is a pretty formidable stadium. I don't know if you guys on the call have watched it, but it's the biggest tennis stadium that we have. It is a massive arena. There's a little bit of fun that you'll do is you'll try to. I actually had some practice sets with Andy before the tournament started, Andy Murray, and you know, at the end of the practice sets, you grab the ball and you do the token where you try to, you know, hit the ball out of the stadium. Well, you know, you can't do it. It is a massive stadium. So the one thing I really wanted to do when I approached that match is to really try not to let the moment get the better of me, and definitely not to play the reputation of Roger Federer at the other end, because I feel as if sometimes they're hard enough to beat as it is, but as soon as you start putting those guys on a pedestal and start playing their reputation, I think that you've got no chance. So I wanted to, you know, a mantra, I actually write it on my racket, is to control the controllables. And what I mean by that is to really try to control the things that I can control. Now, I can't control how Roger's going to play. He might play amazing, he might not. You know, if he's serving unreturnable serves, you know, I can't really control that. But if he's hitting winners all over the shop, it's you know, sometimes some of these good guys can take it out of your hands a little bit. But what I can control is the intensity I bring to the court. You know, my mental application, my focus. I can really control how stingy I am with my errors. You know, I don't want to give this guy any points. I don't want to give him, you know, any type of advantage. So I really wanted to control the controllables and not play his reputation. And you walk onto Ash, and you know, it's a night match. The lights are on, the crowd's massive, and you might not pick it up on TV, but the US Open crowd's quite vocal there. If they're not engaged in the match, they'll be chattering amongst themselves throughout the points. And, you know, to begin with, it was probably like that. Roger started off pretty well. He won the first 6-3, I think. And I think he actually served for the second set. And I was just kind of holding in there. I was just kind of scraping by. He was playing well. He had his, you know, short slice. When he started to do that short slice, you know, he's having, he's in control of his game, but bit by bit I was chipping away and managed to break him after he served for that set, and all of a sudden that momentum changed, and it was hot that night too. It was like a really hot, sticky Brisbane conditions that I grew up in, these humid conditions, and it was a hot box there. We were sweating from everywhere. And bit by bit, I managed to turn the momentum of the match around. The crowd started to really engage in the match. It was dead silence during the points and eruptions when Roger was winning the points. When I was winning, they weren't quite as happy. But I had my box and a few guys cheering me on. And, bit by bit, I managed to turn the tables. And again, that belief grows, because after you get through those initial stages, and once those nerves disappear, and once you really start to feel the environment that you're in, and it's no longer an overawing experience, once you start to feel that environment you're in, you start to just play tennis, and you start to enjoy it. And bit by bit, I managed to turn it around, and I played some really good tennis in some tight moments, and came away with the win. And overall, the feeling when I won was complete. It was actually relief. I'd come close to be beating some of these top guys before, and this time I managed to kind of put myself in a position to run through the finish line, and I actually took my chance this time. And look, to make a last 8 of a Grand Slam is a pretty surreal moment. It's an achievement that a lot of players, a lot of your peers and a lot of your players, that's a box they want to tick. Like to be in the last 8 club at a Grand Slam is a pretty special thing. And now my accreditation, my US Open accreditation, I have the L8, which gives you kind of tickets and stuff for life at the US Open. So if I want to go back and watch some tennis when I finish playing, it'll probably be a few years after I hang them up, because I probably don't want to kind of rush back onto the scene straight away.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty cool moment. When you go into the locker rooms at the end, it's pretty quiet there. It's just Roger's teams in his section, and then my section's kind of towards the end there. And then it kind of probably kicks in that you've done something that that you can be a bit proud of.
No, man, that's awesome. Really, really good. Well, I almost felt like I was in the match with you there, mate. It was pretty good. But look, just want to get to a few of the kids' questions. I'll really start from the start. From TJ. He just wanted to know, just in while you're in isolation, what are you doing, like fitness-wise? How are you keeping your fitness up?
Yeah, look, it's not easy, because obviously I'm confined to 4 walls. I'm lucky that I'll just see if I can flip this around. I've got my bike set up over there, so it's at the window.
Yeah.
You can see, I don't know if you can see that bike, and I've just got my equipment there. So I've got some weights and some weight plates and some med balls. So I'm trying to stay, in shape. Obviously, it's pretty tough, and each morning I wake up. I think it's really good to have routines. So I've got a little checklist. You can see where I write down my checklist for the day. Some of the things that I want to achieve today. And one of the first things was a workout, an upper body workout. So I actually was up at, I think, 5 o'clock because of a bit of jet lag, and I knew I was coming on to talk to you guys. So I thought I'd do my upper body workout this morning. So got that done. I had a bit of brekkie. Going to have the chat to you guys. I'm going to watch a bit of NFL later, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a bike session. So look, I think it's just important to kind of to write down a bit of a plan of attack. I'm quite a visual learner, so I like to kind of look at what I've got to do and kind of tick the boxes off. But for me, I enjoy working out, maybe not in a hotel room, but for me, it's all about why I work out. And I enjoy the feeling of knowing that I'm working out because in a month and a half's time, the Australian Open Summer's around the corner, and I'm going to be competing in Australia in front of hopefully some pretty cool Australian fans. So it's about having those goals and also keeping in mind, what you're doing it for. I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, great. Mate, next one's from one of your mates, one of the coaches online. Just said, congrats, Johnny, on your first, hopefully, of many ATP titles. Well done on the career and carving it out for yourself. This is from Colin. He just asked if you could do anything different from your junior days, what would it be?
Look, it's a long time ago. I'll have to go back into the memory bank from that. But for me, I probably would have liked to have worked on. I don't think I probably worked on a lot of areas of my games because a lot of it was self-taught. So literally, I would maybe have half an hour lesson a week when I was youngish, and I used to live out kind of in the bush a little bit, and I'd wheel the heaviest ball machine down through this little kind of bush track about 100 meters, and I'd have like 10 extension cords plugged to one another. It took ages to set up, and I would, for hours after school, I'd be putting the balls in this massive heavy ball machine. You know the one, Sandon, is I'll tell you about another time. It was one of the heaviest things, and I would hit hours a day in the afternoon just by myself. I'd empty all the balls into this big ball machine, and I'd hit forehands. I'd hit backhands for a couple of hours every day. And no one was on court with me. I just do it because, I loved it. But I think as a result of that, I feel as if from the back of the court, I can match it with anyone. And I'm pretty disciplined. I feel as if I can hold really good quality cross-court rallies and change direction at the right time. But I think as a result of that, I probably didn't learn, those the fine skills so much. So, the volleying and working on those hands and feel quite as much. I don't think I did enough of that. So I would have loved to have had more of those skills because I think it would have added another dimension to my game. And the other thing I wish I'd done a little more, and back then when I was playing, we didn't have strength and conditioning coaches. We didn't have physios. For me, it was, it just wasn't. Sports science, I didn't think was all that big back then. And I wish I had access to that a little bit earlier because I don't think I would have had 2 shoulder surgeries if I'd had more knowledge of just how important that was. So I do think that doing that off-court stuff's pretty important to have a bit of longevity in your career.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Well, next one's from Eliza. She just asked what has motivated you most to continue tennis through COVID-19?
Yeah, look, I just love not all the time, because sometimes especially if you're going on a bit of a run where you're not winning as many matches, tennis can feel like the worst thing in the world. But I do love the feeling of competing. I love getting out on court, and I love working towards something. So it wasn't easy during COVID. In Queensland, none of the tennis centres were open, and we were allowed outside for one bit of exercise a day. So there were a few families that I didn't know before, but they kind of reached out to me, and they had hard courts in their backyards. So my one bit of exercise was going to these families' places, and I'd bring a hitting partner and I'd go out there and hit on their courts. But for me, the reason why I play tennis now, number one, is because I actually honestly do believe that there are things in my game that I can get better. And that actually really, I find a challenge, and I find that actually really enjoyable to still feel as if, and that was when I had my second shoulder surgery. The thing that kept me going, I didn't know if I was going to play tennis again, but after a while, and it was many, many months of kind of self-mourning, I thought that I hadn't quite reached my potential, and that actually really motivated me to keep going. And that's still the thing today. I still feel as if I can play better tennis. So that's one thing. And the second thing, the reason why I play tennis now is for the big moments. You know, being able to play Wimbledon, being able to play Australian Open, the Grand Slams are really special. And Sandon, you know yourself, you know, when you were playing, I don't think you took those moments for granted. You know, when you walk through the gates of the All England Club for the first time, it is of the year, and you can smell the fresh grass, or you get your one practice hit on the match courts for 45 minutes before the tournament starts. Those moments are awesome. And playing Davis Cup, potentially another Olympics. You know, I played in Rio. These moments are the ones you live for, and they still get me really excited. So during COVID for myself, it was the fact that, you know, after we finally beat this pandemic and we get over this, you know, this ordinary disease, it's terrible. But if we can get through it, you know, there's some pretty cool things waiting for me on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, just listening to you talk about it, mate, it's just the excitement of all those things that you have to look forward to and keep that. You know, I mean, obviously, what's Roger? He's getting close to 40 and he's still playing. And I think you spoke about the sports science of the game. That's what's kept him and Rafa and all these other guys longer in the game, because they've looked after themselves. So really important message there.
Yeah, for sure.
Just from Jane and Ashley, they sort of had similar questions just about, you did touch on playing other sports when you were a little bit younger. You know, you obviously did that. But were they sports that you enjoyed as much as tennis, or tennis was something that you were good at, and that's when you ended up choosing tennis?
You know, look, I really enjoyed. I probably especially enjoyed soccer. I don't think anyone enjoys cross country, but I did it because Mum made me, and I could run. But soccer was something that I really enjoyed. I loved getting into a team environment, and that's probably why I love, you know, stuff like Davis Cup so much. Being able to play team sports is awesome. It's such a different thing to what tennis is. So I really enjoyed soccer. I loved it, and I really probably enjoy a lot of golf now. So there were sports that I enjoyed probably just as much as tennis, but I think you gravitate towards things that you're probably good at, and the reality is the best thing I was good at was tennis, and it's only natural to gravitate towards something that you're good at, and look, over the time, I think it was a pretty good decision, and once it was kind of like in high school, kind of, especially 2-3 years into high school, I kind of had to. I didn't have enough hours in the day to be able to play multiple sports and that. So it was around then that I started to really focus in on tennis. But I think growing up, it was really important for me to play other sports. And I look at a lot of for example, the Spanish and some of these Europeans. I think that the Spanish, especially, they have great footwork. And yeah, look, that could be because they play on clay and they hit a lot of balls on the dirt. But I think it's because a lot of them grow up playing soccer, you know, and I think that really helps them. The Americans, there's so many Americans, and I was saying this to Luch, we were talking about it. A lot of those Americans, doesn't matter the size of them, they have incredibly quick arms. And I think it's because a lot of those kids grew up playing baseball and American football, where they're, you know, hoiking around the ball. And as a result, they've got incredibly lively arms. So you see even Tommy Paul, who's smaller than me, and you know, he can crack his serve over 220. I was playing him in Astana, and he's got an incredibly lively arm, and so many of them do. Smicheks and these guys, Tiafos, who aren't necessarily blessed with the height of an Isner or a Pelka, but they've got these really fast arms, and I think that's because they grew up playing overhead sports that are common in America. And on the flip side, those Europeans that grew up playing soccer, they've got really good footwork. So I think at an early age, it's actually pretty cool to do other sports, and I think it increases your motor skills in general, and it makes you a better all-rounded tennis player.
Yeah, no, mate, that's great. Great advice. Let's go. Another one here, just on which I liked. Linnea Bryant just asked, how do you control your anger on court?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I'm not necessarily the most angry person. Another guy who's in quarantine down the road, Jordan Thompson, former Davis Cup member. He's an angry guy.
Yeah, but he goes through about 20 hats a year because he just throws his hat on the ground.
Yeah, and rackets.
Yeah.
So, look, for me, I really focus on. I think one of my strengths is, and I think it's actually really underrated in general, is my mental strength, my mental application that I bring on the court. And I think at this level, at the top level, you've got to use your strengths massively to your advantage. And I really do believe as if that's one of my strengths, being able to control my emotions, being able to bring a certain level of mental intensity every point. So I really try to emphasize and use one of my strengths. And for me, that's really trying to control your emotions. Now, sometimes it doesn't always happen. It's just like if your strengths, maybe you serve and you're having an off day serving, you're not getting that percentages up. But again, we go back to controlling the controllables. And that's the one thing. My mental application is something that I can control and something that I really do feel as if is a strength of mine. So I've worked on it. I work on it on the practice court. I work on it when I go into matches, and I think it's a really underrated skill that that you all can bring if you want to. You can go through different types of routines and speak to people about different routines, whether that's a toweling routine at the back of the court when you're starting to to not think clearly. So there are little things that you can do to kind of switch back on. And you've got to find what works for you. But for me, the reason why I try to stay so mentally in control is because I think that that's a strength of mine, and it's something that I try to use to my advantage.
Yeah, I guess on that, Chloe had a quick question and with mindfulness, because I know a lot of our kids do a bit of that. Were there any tools, like mindfulness tools, that you've used in the past that help you with that?
Now, look, back in the day when I was growing up, I probably didn't have access to the tools. We didn't have smartphones back in the day. And I know there's a lot of apps that you can now download, that meditation apps even, that just create just a clearer headspace. So not necessarily that, but for myself, I didn't necessarily speak to a lot of sports psychs, but I do speak to people that, part of my team that I have a real connection with or a trust with. And I think something that I'm not good at is really being open and opening up to people when I'm struggling. And it's something that I want to constantly work on. So I don't necessarily think there's, a magic trick here, but sometimes for me, breathing techniques really work. Toweling techniques really work for myself. And I can't stress enough, it is horses for courses. You've got to identify something that works for you, because everyone's an individual. I'm not a big believer that everyone should have the same technique on court. Ideally, I'd love to have Roger's technique on every single shot, but it's not realistic. So you got to find what works for you, and try different things. And it starts on the practice court. When you're starting to feel a bit angry, try different routines, whether that's going and taking time with the towel. Try different things and really find what works for you. And when it clicks, then it's about being repetitive with it and repeatability.
Well, mate, look, yeah, there's a few more there that I'd go through, but look, really appreciate your time today, John, and talking to all the kids and coaches. It was awesome to have you on.
No, yeah.
Some really
not a problem. If there's any more, if there's any more, if we don't cover it, feel free to message me or I'm in quarantine, so I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, I can send a few more to you, and you might want to answer back to a few of the kids and coaches on there. But really great having you on, and all the best in quarantine and for the summer when we get to it.
No, thanks, guys, and yeah, look, get through the COVID period, and know that there's some pretty cool things on the other side. But wish you all the best of luck. I loved being in Adelaide at the start of the year, and hopefully we can win another Davis Cup tie down there soon.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So just on that, I want to thank again John. But with these calls, everyone, just over the next sort of 5 days, I have sent the email out. So really want you to come on. We've got some more good chats lined up in the next 4 days. So 10 o'clock, same sort of format of what we did today with John, and hopefully you guys can get a bit over, at least put, as John said, make a bit of a schedule for yourself each day. You might do some exercise at home. I did send an email out too. There is some tennis on, the ATP Masters is on at the moment, which I'm sure John's watching a bit of that as well. But this is 45 minutes of a day that you guys have got some time to really learn some different things off some really credible people, and John's journey is just the start of that. So hopefully you picked up some things that he spoke about, and we look forward to sharing a few more, having a few more people on and sharing that with you guys over the next few days. So have a good day, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Herndon.
Thank you.
Good job, everyone. See you. Have a good day. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks.